What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave, the first Newswave of 2020. Hopefully this morning isn't too painful for you after New Year's Eve last night, because we do still have a bunch of stuff to go over, which includes a cryptic tweet from the Splatoon Twitter handle that we'll talk about, because it could be pointing to another Splatoon game, maybe. And then also that Final Fantasy VII Remake demo. Well, people are already playing it. We're going to talk a bit about how that's happening and what we're seeing so far, because it sounds like whenever this demo finally unlocks, hopefully it's soon, we're going to get quite a bit more Final Fantasy VII than maybe people were anticipating. As always, guys, if you enjoy this video, make sure to hit the like button. It does help out. You guys have been liking quite a bit over the past few weeks, and it has been helping out a lot, so I do appreciate it. Make sure you are subscribed down below with that red button and the bell icon next to it, just so you can keep up to date on all the gaming news going on in the gaming world. We're actually going to start today with Red Dead Redemption 2. And the Switch. I know it sounds weird, however, people have actually been able to find the Switch Pro Controller icon and texture in the game files, which has kind of caught some people off guard. There was actually this image put out there on Twitter, and yes, it indeed does show a Switch Pro Controller, and now people are wondering, wait a minute, does that mean that Red Dead Redemption 2 is really coming to the Switch? Well, this appears to have been found on the PC version, and that tells me that most likely it's just set up with that image in case you connect, I guess, a Switch controller, Pro Controller, to the game when you're playing on your PC, so that I guess it shows up and they can show you where the button icons are. I mean, that is supported in Steam, but it does make you wonder at least a little bit if Rockstar has something like that in mind for the Switch. And I'm really to the point now where I mean, we saw The Witcher 3 happen, so I guess you really never know. I mean, Red Dead Redemption 2 sounds crazy, but I mean, so did The Witcher 3. Also, I wanted to point this out. I talked about this last night actually, on the second channel, Spawnwave Plus, where we went through a ton of Nintendo games, or at least Nintendo IP and likenesses that were being used on the Microsoft Store to sell some terrible looking Flash games and cell phone games. I mean, we're talking about a bunch of different ones, including Luigi's Mansion 3, Zelda Twilight Princess, and of course, we also saw Pokemon on there as well. We talked about this previously with Breath of the Wild being used, and it was like a HoloLens game, and it's for like the Microsoft Store and Windows. Well, it looks like they've expanded outward, and some of these games have shown up as recently as yesterday, and it's a ton of just random stuff thrown on the Microsoft Store. The descriptions sound like they're being written by bots. It mostly reads like nonsense. If you watch that video, you'll see me trying to read it. It wasn't great. I'm not sure if the Microsoft Store is going to do anything with this. Microsoft obviously curates the store, I assume, but it doesn't look like it's done that well here. The reason I say it looks like they curate is because Breath of the Wild appears to have been pulled down. So we'll see what happens with these ones going forward, but it looks like they're just adding more and more to that store, so I'm curious, I guess, what else they'll pull from. There's even like a Call of Duty one on there. Oh, and a quick heads up. If you were someone who looked at Starlink Battle for Atlas before, and then maybe you saw it for like $10 on Black Friday and Cyber Monday, the prices actually continue to drop. I know, it was $10. Now it is $6, $5.99 on Best Buy site. They must really be having a hard time getting rid of these things. I assume it's just obscene amounts of stock that they had and were never able to move. Specifically, it seems like it's Best Buy anyway that I've seen, especially in my area where they still have them stacked up. And yes, last time I saw it was 10. I guess now if I went there, it'd be $6. I mean, looking at this, Starlink Battle for Atlas with the R-Wing, I mean, for $6, that's pretty good. I mean, the game itself I thought was okay. I would just like to see Ubisoft have a chance to tackle Star Fox completely, because that was the whole reason I even was that interested in the game, was because Star Fox was in there, I think, like most of us, right? So if they just made an entire game similar to Starlink, but it was all Star Fox, you didn't really have necessarily like the Toys to Life stuff, it was just a straight up game, I think it would actually do all right. I mean, it did really well on the Switch, and a lot of that had to do because of Star Fox. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. We're going to start with Final Fantasy VII Remake, the demo. Remember, we had talked about listings on the PlayStation Network leaking out that showed Patapon 2 and a Final Fantasy VII demo, and that is exciting stuff. Now, Square, of course, they've been doing demos for a couple of games, right? Dragon Quest XI S that's a 10-hour demo, right? That's a pretty big deal there. So I was very very, very hopeful after seeing Octopath and Dragon Quest XI S. Maybe they're going to start doing a lot of demos, and maybe their next really big release, Final Fantasy VII Remake, would get a demo. Maybe one around the E3 demo, some of the stuff we saw there, the stuff that they were showing off and letting people play. And, well, it looks like people have actually been able to unlock the demo. People were putting out on Twitter even that it was due to dev kits or test kits that allowed them to open up the demo, load it up, and start playing. And some of the footage is actually online now. I'm not going to put any of the footage here because even the people who have been playing it didn't put it up because they didn't want to spoil anything. And to be honest, I'm sure Square would not be very happy about that. So I'll show some footage that we've already seen at E3 through the demos there that have been kind of shared. But the big thing about this is it appears to be kind of the beginning of the game, specifically the bombing run and the escape. And from some people I have talked to that have played this demo, it looks like it's roughly 40-ish minutes, 40 minutes to an hour long, which isn't bad. And yes, visually, it looks amazing. Like, that's the big thing here. Everything we've seen so far really has been through compressed video and streams and YouTube videos, and to have it actually in front of you is something else, apparently. I mean, the biggest question now is when can we all play this thing? Because it's not easy necessarily to unlock the demo. It's not like a ton of people are doing it. There are a select few that have been able to play this demo, so it's still locked down pretty well right now. And I'm hoping, what I was originally hoping was that they were going to do it on New Year's. They were like, today, that it'll just go live, but most likely it'll be next week. So like the first full week in January, they'll put up some new demos, and hopefully one of them is the big one, Final Fantasy VII Remake. It could also be held off for a month. It could be held off until like 2 weeks before the game comes out or something. However, at the end of the demo, apparently there is something that asks you to pre-order the game, so this is definitely being used heavily as a marketing tool that maybe they want to get out there a month or two in advance, and yeah, maybe it is an early January thing. I'm just ready to play this game. I mean, seriously, we've been waiting since 2015 when we first saw it, and we've heard of its troubled development. Now we're hearing that it's in multiple parts because they really want to get into the lore and the story by focusing and really stretching some of it out to show off parts of the story that we heard about but didn't necessarily see. So I want to get in there, I want to play it, I want to see how the combat is, and I'm glad to hear that it's pretty much that whole first run, basically what everyone was playing at E3 before. So exciting stuff there. It sounds like it's a large enough demo, I think, to get the feel for the game, and now we just have to wait for it to actually unlock and get posted, but I will keep you up to date here on it. Next up, let's talk about a new patent that Sony has filed that I think is actually going to be used by them because it's going to be for multiple applications. The interesting part here is while it is a UI that's being introduced for AR and VR, it apparently is going to be able to be used for Nintendo and even Microsoft platforms. At least it's being designed for everything that includes those, but it also appears to be able to be used by things that necessarily aren't VR, AR, so that could also be for things like their Sony, their TVs, right? Their smart TVs and other things. So let's take a quick look at what this patent exactly is. Now, this was spotted by Respawn first, and they say on December 26, 2019, Sony filed a patent for gesture-based user interface for AR and VR with gaze trigger. You can see some of the different gestures below that includes a trigger gesture, so a closed fist, and then the example close gesture, which is like the hand wave. So the idea here is that the UI supports hand gestures and movements essentially to navigate around, but in order to do that, you would have cameras that track those motions, which kind of reminds me of the Kinect. However, this looks like something that a UI anyway that would be used across multiple devices, which, like I said, includes something Nintendo might want to put out, or even Microsoft. And the fact that Microsoft has experience in this already is interesting, that Sony would develop for stuff that Microsoft would have. But I mean, it could also be used for just Windows in general and like PC, right? Maybe they go a little further with the next VR headset for the PlayStation, and it's usable on PC as well. We already know that the current PlayStation VR will be usable on the PS5, but I think this UI probably will show up for the first time with the PlayStation VR 2, and the fact that they're already diving this deep in with some of these patents, and we've seen other patents. I'm hoping that means that the PlayStation VR 2 will also be shown alongside the PlayStation 5, which is something we think is going to be shown in February maybe. possibly CES next week. I mean, that would actually be something that would be interesting for them to go over at CES, kind of the way their VR technology has evolved and some of the stuff they're doing with their UI here and kind of making it so it's more gesture-based rather than using your controller the whole time, although that still kind of sounds like the Kinect, right? But I guess if it's for VR and their smart TVs, you don't need the remote. No, sure, I get that. And if it is more intuitive and a bit better to use, we'll say, then all right, maybe they have something there. And it's Sony working further into VR, and for them that makes sense, but it doesn't seem to make sense for Microsoft. At least that's what they are saying. But it'll be interesting to see what Sony has in store for us for the PlayStation VR 2 and possibly a full UI with gesture-based tracking. Next up, let's take a trip back to the Nintendo 64, specifically with Super Mario 64. Now, there is a person who works heavily in kind of the modification scene for Super Mario 64. They've done some crazy stuff. Remember, like the portal gun, for example, in Super Mario 64. That was amazing. However, there is one thing I've always looked at that game for the 64 and thought, I said, it would have been really neat if they had split screen in that game, mostly because when I would play Mario 64 back in the day, right, by myself, I always looked at the front of the 64 and I said, it has 4 controller ports, but this is a single player game. It's so strange to me. Well, take a look at this. This is from Kays Emanuar, who talked about this, I would say even breakthrough at this point, split screen on real hardware for the Nintendo 64 for Mario 64. It shows him playing it, running around, and switching between controllers. That is insane. That is crazy. Now, I know we kind of played around with the idea of multiplayer in Mario 64 on the DS, but to see the 64 itself doing split screen and running around is amazing. Now, when you transfer between worlds, for example, you will just basically, like someone who's left behind will then jump ahead with them, and you can run around in a world together through split screen. How cool is that? Now, he did go on to say that the frame rate is affected, so it is lower when you're outdoors, for example, but in the castle, it's 60 frames and all of that, which is great. And it doesn't look like it's going to be released anytime soon, at least not until February, according to them. And who knows, it could even be pushed back further, considering this is just kind of a fun project they're doing. But wow, Mario 64, it just has so much to it, it seems, and it's really cool to see Kays Emanuar still working on this game, because this is something I would have liked to have seen Nintendo do, you know, years and years and years ago in this game. That's how I would have liked to see it launch, but it does appear that there were some severe frame rate issues at times in this game that would need to be smoothed out. However, I will at least say the 64 just had bad frame rate at times completely. I mean, GoldenEye, like, I think went down to like 5 frames if you started doing remote mines everywhere. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Splatoon or Splatoon 2, maybe Splatoon 3, maybe a spin-off game. There's a lot of possibilities here, but let's start from the beginning. So what happened was last night, as of course we're winding down to a new year and all of that late at night, well, this was posted. I guess technically for Japan, it would have been the next day already. They would have been into 2020 and all of that. That's great. But look at this. It's a standard looking slide at first glance, right? Look at it and say, oh, that's cool. Have a great 2020. But then you look down into the water and strangely it says SOS, right? And then to go a little further from that, if you look into kind of the water ripples, it says save our salmons, which is strange. Why would they tease something in what looks like a very standard, hey, have a great year next year, right? Strange. I mean, we've also seen some other plays, like Sonic apparently had some hidden text in his video that they were showing off for the new year. I'm almost wondering if companies are just going to start doing that from now on. They'll put out a, seemingly innocent message like, hey guys, have a great 2020 or 2021, and they're telling us that like Mother 3 is getting localized or something, you know, in like the waters. But to see this is of course getting the speculation running rampant right now about Splatoon. Is it too soon for Splatoon 3? Because from what we have heard, they haven't really even started much on Splatoon 3. Now, that was about half a year ago where they said that. Could they possibly do a spin-off game of some kind to hold people over going into next generation, you know, years and years from now, where we get another Switch and then Splatoon 3 shows up? Because I don't really think there needs to be another Splatoon on this current gen Switch. I think Splatoon should be a once a generation game, right? Like it shows up, it's the multiplayer game for that generation for the Switch for Splatoon. But that doesn't necessarily mean there couldn't be a spin-off title, because Splatoon is big enough to not just be a numbered series. They could do other things with the story and characters to where they don't necessarily have the standard multiplayer experience, right? They could go do something crazy. They could go do an adventure game. They could do like an RPG. They could play around with a couple of different characters, maybe do a side-scrolling game. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff they could do here outside of just Splatoon 3. Could also just be DLC. Also very possible. Although I thought they were pretty much done with downloadable content with Splatoon 2, but it keeps selling, so maybe they're thinking, hey, there's still more money to be made there. One thing's for sure, though, something interesting is going on here with Splatoon. We're just not really sure what just yet. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from JFK saying, Metroid Prime 4 will release before Shin Megami Tensei 5. Just you watch. I actually think when Shin Megami 5 is eventually shown, it's going to be a very short runway to the game. I think they're going to have it mostly ready to go. And I think the reason we haven't necessarily heard of it just yet is because they're also working through Persona 5 Scramble as well as Royal. They have a few things going on that they maybe don't want to just lump everything together and hope that everyone remembers everything. I think they probably want to keep Persona and Shin Megami Tensei 5 as separate as they can, and that means, okay, let's get Scramble out there at least to the Japanese crowd, right? Because they should get it first, then it'll probably be localized later. Then maybe that means that Shin Megami Tensei 5 gets maybe shown, maybe the first direct, right? Just to say, hey, it's still alive, we're still doing it, you can expect it, you know, at the end of this year. Maybe they show it at E3 and they're like, it's a holiday title. There's a lot of stuff going here, but I think they'll show it, and I think like 6 months later, it'll be out. I do think it will release, though, before Prime 4. And ladies and gentlemen, let's go do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit the like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about today, whether it's the Final Fantasy VII Remake demo already being played. I think we're all ready for it to be unlocked, right? How do you feel about it kind of being like the first section of the game from what we've seen? And how do you feel about that combat? And then also, what do you think this Splatoon tease actually means, if anything? Or are they just kind of messing with us? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.